Hello and welcome to our ISE Fireside webinar. Our topic today is Cloud Security Simplified. Less is more with CNAPP. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Our program today is sponsored by Orca Security. So many thanks for our partnership with Orca Security. We have a great program planned with each and every one of you today, and we're going to have some terrific discussions. But before we get started, let's just run through our agenda. We'll kick off with some panelist introductions and learn a little bit more about our sponsor, Orca Security, and then we'll jump into our panel discussions. And then we'll hear from you with our Q&A session. So what we'd ask for you to do is, as you think of a question, go ahead and put it in a Q&A chat window. At 2:35, we will answer as many questions as possible before we have to go off air. And I know this is a new topic for many of you, so we're hoping for lots of great questions from each and every one of you out there today joining us. Now, if you are in need of a CPE credit, please let us know. You will receive your information to have your deposit, so you'll have proof of attendance tomorrow morning. Additionally, you'll need to complete the survey to let us know that you need that proof of attendance. So that will happen in the chat window, and click on the Survey Monkey link, and also you'll be able to tell us what you thought about today. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first panelist is Andre Gold. Andre, it is great to see you. You look so suave in your blazer. And you look real good.
It's great to be seen. Thank you, Marcy. I didn't realize that I had to get dressed up for our fireside chat, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad you like it. But no,
I do.
I certainly want to say thanks, to you, Marcy, for allowing me to participate in this, as well as thanks to Orca Security as well. But real quick, just a little bit about me. So just recently, I was with Cardinal Health, so Fortune 20 company, about 150, $160 billion of revenue. There was a vice president of cloud and infrastructure engineering, and had pockets of governance as well as security operations. Prior to Cardinal, I've spent the last 15, 20 years, in technology, having a lot of leadership, different positions. I've done everything except write code for a living, but I have done that from time to time. But I've held VP of Ops roles. I've built out CISO programs as well as been a CISO, and just super excited to be a part of this fireside chat today.
Well, thanks, Andre. It's good to have you with us and sharing your insights and perspectives. Xavier, long time no see. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Xavier Ash. I work for Truist. And if you aren't aware, Truist is the merger between BB&T and SunTrust. And this is an exciting weekend for us. We are finally going completely purple. So if you are used to seeing SunTrust or BB&T in your neighborhoods, all those signs will be changing over the next week, and we'll be completely Truist, and that lines up with our technology. So we were going through a big change this weekend, and it's going to be lots of fun, and we're very excited to be here today to talk about cloud. It's a huge component of our infrastructure. So,
well, excellent. We're glad to see that happening with Truist, and we appreciate you joining us today. John, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce us to Orca Security for those that may not be familiar with y'all?
Great, thanks, Marcy, definitely. So on my end, I've kind of come from two streams that relate to cloud security, but I spent about 10 years in the U.S. Army doing cyber before it was cyber was a word in the Army. It's actually evolved quite a bit. Late 90s, the Army was still calling units data processing units, so that's and then Cyber Command was basically formed in roughly around the 2015 timeframe. So I served in a unit called the Western Cyber Protection Center, and commanded a cyber protection team and a variety of things on that front. So that's my operator experience. And then on the industry side, I work for Cloud Passage, which is kind of a company that was acquired last year, but it was one of the first cloud security companies that started around the 2010 frame when kind of Amazon was kind of just AWS was just starting in that front. So got to see the early days now I've got a lot of experience kind of to see a lot of things come into play that people were wishing we had 10 years ago. So it's kind of nice to see that. And thanks, Marcy. And then about Cloud Pass, so to talk a little bit about Orca I think the easiest way is to talk about Orca from the two things that Orca kind of solves, the two problems they solve. And one is I call the friction problem or the visibility problem, and the other is the what I would call the alert overload problem. So the visibility problem is the cloud is kind of unique, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but you can actually have 100 visibility into the cloud. That's kind of the nice thing about cloud security. And there are technologies that allow you to do that. And they're fairly new. It's kind of a growing field. And that's one of the things that Orca is one of those forerunners that saw that opportunity that was provided by the cloud service providers. And the other thing has to do with alert overload, the fact that like, what do you work on, right? And how do you prioritize what you're working on? We all know we're faced with thousands of things. And the cloud is actually kind of nice. It doesn't have to be the cloud on that one, but you have to start out with that mind think as a company to approach that problem. If you started 10 years ago and you didn't think about that, then you have problems because you have to get a lot of your pieces of your product to talk to each other, right? So, and we'll talk about that more. But again, Orca, cloud security company, we like to think of ourselves as a native, forward thinking, in the know kind of cloud security company.
Well, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and jump into our discussions, gentlemen. So our first topic is going to be about why we need to eliminate security blind spots across AWS and Azure and GCP. What I've been really observing out there is how organizations just of all sizes and industries are really transitioning their infrastructure into the cloud, and security professionals, have become more and more challenged to have visibility into some of these public cloud services like AWS and Azure and GCP. So there's been a lot of gaps and depths of coverage as we've been evolving and taking our journeys into the cloud. So we're seeing misconfigurations and lateral movement and a whole lot of crazy going on out there while we're going so rapidly there. But we're also, at the risk of, unsecured PII and it just changing environments in such a very quick fashion, but very dramatically, because our work structure has changed from working exclusively in person now to remotely to hybrid and everything in between, overall, and our customers are demanding more, and there's just a lot going on, and that's really driving our journey into the cloud. So John, let me sort of jump in and start with you. Tell us a little bit about some of the guiding principles and the paradigms and tools for both public and on-prem and versus a different approach for the cloud, and why is visibility into the cloud just so critical overall? And I know that could be a very long answer, but
right.
We'd love your thoughts just at a kind of high level.
Yeah. So the idea of visibility is important everywhere, but the problem that's unique about the cloud is you can actually get full visibility on the cloud. So for people that have dealt with the cloud, you kind of have to work with the cloud for a while to really understand how the cloud is different. But the cloud, to me, is one thing, it doesn't have a defined perimeter. It's nebulous, right? We all know that. The shared responsibility model kind of defines there's certain things you don't have to do anymore. That's good and bad, but you kind of really have to think it from a software perspective. Hardware's being done for you in the cloud, right? And but the real key in the end of the day is without visibility, you can't get context. You can't get a lot of things. And if you and ideally you want visibility everywhere. You want it on-prem, but you can't really get it on-prem because you can just have all these machines that are kind of hooked up in some different way, and you may not even know that machine exists. And in the cloud, even 6 years ago, you could have that same problem. But now the cloud service providers, AWS, Azure, and Google, they actually develop technology to allow you to go in and actually know and inventory everything. And there's companies that have been able to leverage that technology. So it's not whether visibility is valuable or not. It's the fact that you can do visibility now in the cloud where you cannot do it on-prem, right? So
you bring up a really good point, because, let me just ask Xavier his thoughts here. He's talking about how Truist is rapidly going to the cloud, and they're all going to be purple next week. I'm excited for that. But, an average of 50% of the public cloud assets are really incorporated into the IT security regime. And, getting there was definitely challenging. So tell us a little bit of some of the challenges around inadequate visibility that might exist as it pertains to security threats for
Sure.
our folks out there that are sort of on their journey as well?
Yeah, I think the challenge with us is not so much that we have problems on getting the data in. Like I said, visibility is there and is easy to consume, but it's apples and oranges. So when we build applications for the cloud, the vast majority of that infrastructure is serverless. And so when we go and talk about how do we, compare then contrast the controls that we have for an on-prem server, making sure that those are in the same places in this cloud native solution, it takes a little bit more discussion to make sure, do we have the same controls? So we have visibility. We can say, yes, all of these different, services exist. They are attached to this application, which is part of this account. We can tie all that together, but then, knowing, well, what does that mean, right? Is this particular service ingesting files that we need to worry about malware? Is this is there authentication layer here that needs to be compared and contrast with our other authentication regimes? So it's not so much getting the data in, right? It's just a simple API link. It's then understanding what that means and then being able to line it up from an enterprise perspective and still be able to do all the same things that you're doing for on-prem. You've also got to do it over here, even though the things that you're protecting is completely different. So
Andre, what can't we see in the cloud and what can we see in the cloud? And why do we need to do this? And what's the cost of not getting this type of visibility? And is there a way just to compensate and just sort of take a shortcut here?
Yeah, so let me attempt it.
Okay, I can hear you. Okay.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. But when I look, so I'll go back and hit on what John and Xavier said, just to repeat the fact that you can't have visibility, into the cloud. I think the other thing that exists, out there is that as we look at visibility, it's, providing that level of education awareness to both our engineers as well as our security operators to understand, okay, so what's net new that should also be of concern for us. One of the things that we're doing to try to close that particular gap over at Cardinal is we set up two things. One is we set up a digital university, a digital cloud university that we bring our security practitioners through, as well as app dev folks. Whoever wants to partake in it can go and select courses because 80% of our workloads are in the cloud. The second thing that I do is I have a cloud training and awareness team that goes out there and looks at cloud champions across the environment to ensure that they're cognizant of the capabilities, the tooling, and how do you measure and get the same visibility in the cloud as you would on-prem. So those are some things that we're doing as it relates to kind of, what the risks are, the costs are. I'd say a breach in the cloud is no materially different than a breach on-prem as it relates to total cost. And I think you also have parallel compensating controls that you could have taken on-prem and put in the cloud. The only thing that I'll caveat, in regards to that is one of the biggest flaws I see as companies make transitions from on-prem to the cloud is they want to take that same security posture that they had on-prem, micro, macro level segmentation, et cetera, and then attempt to adopt that in the cloud, which adds huge amounts of complexity, creates blind spots, and costs a whole hell of a lot of money to do.
So let's go ahead and sort of jump into compliance, because you kind of made me think about that a little bit. And when we're talking about not having clarity in the cloud, well, that kind of gives a little bit of heartburn, I'm sure, to many of our auditors out there and those that kind of care about that realm. But, it's often been stated that security does not equal compliance, right? But we all know that actually it gets us some budget at the end of the day. So, but without 100% coverage out there in your cloud estate, you don't know what's really at risk for being extracted or compromised. And if you're moving all your assets there in terms of information about your customers and your code and your applications, you really have to have some clarity there inside a cloud that is, and I always found it to be ironic that we call it the cloud deliberately, because if you're in an airplane and you fly through a cloud, you can't see where you're going. So, or you have fog on the ground, right? So, but anyway, Xavier, relying on these agent-based tools to support your cloud compliance initiatives seems like an endless per asset, type of integration project. And it just seems like it just goes on and on and on and quite expensive. So now that you guys kind of, bringing it all together overall, so how are you simplifying, cloud and compliance to encompass some capabilities to give you aspects of better vulnerability management and malware scanning and file integrity monitoring? So having some clarity inside that cloud, so to speak.
Yep. Yeah, and like I said before, it's being able to translate those controls. And so we think about a control like file integrity monitoring, that is a very server-specific control. And so if we're standing up servers, in our cloud environments, they are a standard build server. They get the same type of agent-based solutions that you would do on an on-prem server. So the challenge is really around those serverless solutions. And so what is file integrity monitoring look like for a particular solution? So we have to take that approach and say, here are each of our controls. How does that translate in a serverless environment? And then how do we make sure that if they are, a cloud native, something that, Google or Amazon provides, how do we make sure that information lines up with the rest of our, like I said, file integrity monitoring? If all of our data is over here with all of our, physical servers or virtual servers, but then we have, other types of configuration and configuration management and change controls that are equivalent that we would like to have as a overall solution, we have to then say, we can't just go off of a platform and say, hey, this tool does our file integrity monitoring. So you go to that tool to look across our environment. You have to say, nope, that is one of our data sources, but then we have to kind of pull that into a higher level dashboard to say, I need to see my security across my entire environment. So that includes servers and serverless. And to do that, we really have to pull the data away from the original tool set and say, I want to see all of my configuration management controls and their outputs and their operational, responses. That has to be at a higher level dashboard. So that's what we've been building out, is making sure that we take each of our cyber capabilities and not have it tool centric. It's got to be, the tools produce the data, but we're going to consume and use the data in my cyber operations team as multiple data sources. And so we had to take that approach to make sure that we could be flexible with each of, here's Azure's, here's Google's, here's Amazon's. They all have really good solutions. So we don't want to come in and enforce, say, hey, no, we've already picked this vendor for file integrity monitor. You've got to do that across the board. Say, no, we'd like to use Azure's capability there, but how do we pull that back in and make sure operations, compliance, all of those have that, and that's where you have to build that layer of abstraction.
So I'm going to ask John this question, and John, I want to be clear. I don't want it to be super product specific, but Xavier kind of touched on it. These tools and technologies, though, out there, obviously inclusive of Orca, but are intelligently able to really combine some of these data points, out there. And how does that work a little bit to the different layers in the technology stack? And how are we preventing it from just sending us a bunch of alerts? I mean, I've been in this industry a long time, and a little bit of dating myself, was one of the early employees with SecureWorks. And when we were there, we were terrorizing our customers every 5 minutes with an alert. Andre's laughing because we terrorized him nonstop, alert. And obviously you want to aggregate and kind of prioritize. So how do we do that now in this sort of modern world in the cloud? Oh, you're on mute.
I think we have the advantage now that we're on, that we know more than we did, 10 years ago. And Xavier has a
longer
really
than that.
I know it's longer than that. Really. The abstraction model that Xavier is talking about is the fact that a lot of things have happened in silos. You have vulnerability management software that's kind of happened on its own, then configuration management has happened on its own, FIM has happened on its own, malware has happened on its own. So how do you join those things, right? You could use a seam, maybe you can extract the data, you can, but some of the more companies that are now kind of thinking we've had the advantage of time, why not build what we call it a universal data model. right? And ultimately it won't be universal. 10 years from now, it won't be completely universal data model because we didn't think about something that will happen 10 years from now. But the problem that a lot of vendors face now is the fact that they did something and now they've got it, and they bought something or they built something, and then now they've got to talk to each other, and they're off, I don't want to get too technical, but they're off passing JSON or CSV or XML to each other, and then figuring out how do you combine that data so you can prioritize, right? And when you've got a universal data model or whatever you want to call it, you can actually combine those things. The rules don't have to be simple, but the vulnerability management system, it's exactly what Xavier said. They can all talk to each other in a way. They're not super smart, but they're a lot smarter than they were. The configuration management can inform vulnerability management, when can inform like, oh wait, you've got a piece of malware on that server, right? Or you've got sensitive data on that server, right? You can start looking at relationships and track lateral movement risk. So the key really is getting that holistic view and having a model that you can operate on, and not having these little, every piece of software has its own little database, and now everybody's got to talk to each other, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you bring up a great point, which I'm going to sort of ask a little bit towards Andre, as we're still, jumping in the compliance part here. But you've led some very large enterprise security teams. And one of the things that is always conflicted me now that I'm learning more and more about our journey into the cloud and where our data resides, we have sensitive data out there all over the place. Sometimes it's unstructured in PII. And, as an individual, that gives me a little bit of heartburn out there. But how can we help provide assurance, essentially, that our sensitive data is stored properly in a cloud estate when it's so kludgy to begin with?
It gives you heartburn knowing that your financial data is stored out there or online in the cloud with your bank, as well as your healthcare data. I'm just joking. I'm being rhetorical there.
About that, and then you share your own stuff out there as well. But at the end of the day, you want to have your providers. There's an expectation,
Agreed.
I guess.
Agreed. And so when you look at a company like Cardinal, that's a public company in a highly regulated market, that being healthcare, there is a muscle that's been developed as it relates to data governance and understanding where your assets are, both tangible as well as physical assets, like a pacemaker. That's just the cost of doing business. As the organization went from on-prem to the cloud, we knew that maintaining those controls at the same level was the minimum requirement. And so when we instantiated new workloads or moved new workloads to the cloud, one of the things that we did was we created, I'll just say, tags associated with these workloads. And these tags had relationships to who could access this data, as well as what type of data it is. So that gave us a huge amount of visibility as it relates to where all of our, I'll call it, sensitive data resides, whether or not it was in the cloud or on-prem. The thing that I see that has become a little problematic for us is the cloud just allows you to basically, just create workloads so fast and get compute out there so fast. And so that's one of the reasons why analytics and data lakes have taken off so much, in my respective opinion. And so we have this data now in data lakes, and what we're seeing is people are creating their own interesting extracts of the data. And that although they can access the data, they can view the data, what we're now faced with, how can we ensure that they don't share the data to others? And so we've come a long way in ensuring that our cloud data is secure. We know where it is, but now giving that level of accessibility and extraction has become more problematic for us than in the past.
Well, you bring up a good point, another good point, Andre. We're having to do more with less out there. I mean, it's somewhat challenging. CISOs are deploying more technology, but to keep the business secure. But a lot of times it's impacting the company's operations, and then we're short on qualified talent out there, and a lot of these tools are not integrated too well, so it's not working very seamlessly, especially if you have a fairly complex cloud architecture and you're trying to get everything to talk to each other. It gives my days of I'm dating myself again, when we were doing PeopleSoft and the integration, between the different interfaces, a whole new a whole new realm of things here. So, we're real. And then, again, back to the point earlier is being plagued by all these alerts. And it really does fatigue our security teams. And it has them on sometimes a wild goose chase and creates a frustration level that they've never accomplished something over a course of a couple of days and doesn't prioritize the real problems. And then it happens, that there's a compromise. So, what we're seeing out there, as cited by Gartner, is showing that 73% of the standard audit questions are really around controls, but not performance. So, I mean, like, we're trying to put it all together and optimize our environments, but at the same time, we're exposing ourselves to a lot of different things. And, we're trying to create our users to be more productive, even our teams, but we're probably sometimes, in some instances, just creating more work for ourselves at the end of the day. So, Andre, how can a security team, prioritize that visibility in the cloud with their security strategy? And, this is an interesting time, right? Because a lot of us are on our beginning of our journeys or midway through. So this is a time to plot the course so we can have the right tools and the training at their disposal. So how do you think, security executives that are listening in today should do that?
Yeah, the first thing that I'll say is, I hope that when, on my next opportunity, I'm working for one of those companies that's leveraging that auditor, because we not only get a lot of performance validation on our respective controls, which causes a lot of work. But you're right. The environment is, very challenging. I know that in a couple of companies, that I've been in, we've gone back, and I think that John mentioned it earlier. There's this alert overload. For those that enter the cloud very early, where when you looked at marketplace, there was very little security offerings. You went to one cloud, you got this offering, then you might have become a multi-cloud provider. Then you got this other offering. Now you have all these alerts that are just coming in and crushing you. And things like Seams, just quite candidly, no offense to them, don't solve that respective problem. So one of the things that I've gone back and done with the respective companies is go back and say, hey, what? Let's do a security, I'll call it tools rationalization. Let's focus on what are the important things that we really want to look at. And then one of the things I like, hearing from Orca and stuff is, can we actually integrate into the native cloud capabilities to give us insight that we want, which quite candidly, what I see from most traditional security professionals is that they still want to do what they've done on-prem. And that's where I think a significant mind shift needs to occur so that we can give the right visibility, minimize the alerting, and take advantage of what's naturally native in the cloud. And that's what I've been focusing on with the various teams that I've led here recently.
So that makes a lot of sense, overall, especially with some of the fatigue that can happen with the security teams just in general and sort of chasing red flags out there. Xavier, what are some of your guiding principles as it relates to making sure that the critical alerts are really located, prioritized, and handled, and not just buried inside a mountain of nothing or a lot of noise,
Yeah.
And I know you're a no nonsense kind of guy, so I bet you
Absolutely.
have.
Yeah, we make sure that a lot of our IT folks are very talented technically, but they don't understand the business very well. And so we've been trying to bring that business knowledge into our SOC, right? Is that we understand that the alarm goes off on this server in this environment. It's actually part of, online banking or, mortgage, or what does that mean? And that helps do that prioritization. So yes, we can build that into our systems, but for our people that are sorting through and sifting through those alerts, understanding what is important to the bank, what's important to our clients, that helps float things up. And then our engineers that are putting in those systems to be able to prioritize those alerts can do that. Our people that are reviewing those alerts can do that. And then we also kind of took back this concept of making sure we can distinguish the difference between threat-based alerts, things that, hey, this could possibly be indication of malware or an attack, so actual TTPs, versus change control verification. All right, and change control verification is things like, we were just talking about file integrity monitoring. So file integrity monitoring, somebody changes a file on a server, that happens. We change files on servers and we do so in a certain way. So, when the alarm goes off from file integrity monitoring and we go back and we say, hey, somebody made a change. Is this a valid change? Are they following process? See, now we're going down a path that I don't need my security analysts to be doing change control verification, right? I need them finding the threats. So we've been focusing on how do we make sure that we filter out those type of things and sit into another avenue to do while we can then prioritize on actual threat based alerts.
So John, how do we kind of consolidate here and kind of bring together some of the disparate technologies that, we've deployed, think that they work, and then, keep this balance with our workforce and the retention, of our folks so that we still can have our business be secure and ultimately be, still compliant and not keep me up all night.
Right.
My PII out there.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Marcy. So part of it is, again, we've already talked about, like a single pane of glass or whatever, whatever that means, right? But part of it is like people do want to be able to consolidate all their data in one place. You want to be multi-cloud. We use the term multi-tool, right? So, and but beyond combining the data, it's all about contextualizing the data. And what we use the term frictionless, and a lot of companies use the term frictionless a lot, but frictionless kind of means once we contextualize the data, it's not just about prioritizing things. Something has a score of 99 versus 88 or whatever, but it's also the ability to go in and have the data contextualized. So the operator, whether it be a security practitioner or somebody on the patching team, can go look at that data and understand exactly why that thing was rated and given a high priority. And it's like, okay, I get it. I have trust in the system. So it's not just about scoring the data, but building that context so that people know, whoa, this is a some kind of server that's public facing that has sensitive data on it, and I guess malware gets kicked out immediately. But I don't want to use that example, but there's sensitive data that actually links out to a server downstream inside, and it's like, okay, I better deal with this immediately.
So we have some thunderstorms in the background, so some angry clouds up there. So anyway, one of the things I'm thinking about, again, we're talking about the simplification as well, but John, you might have some experience with this, but I'll lend itself to Andre and Xavier, because you've kind of really looked at it from a whole different perspective in the newer realm, because your journey was relatively recent. So what about improving the total cost of ownership? Does going in this direction, is make it better or more, from the accounting and the finance side of the house? Is there a better total cost of ownership when you're going into the cloud and kind of looking at the consolidation of these kind of tools?
So, Marcia, short answer to that from my experience is yes. As I mentioned earlier, I've gone in a prior company. They were, all brick and mortar, everything was on-prem, and then we went down this process of taking the back office supply chain workloads, into the cloud. And as part of doing that, one of the things that, the cloud provider said as they were building an estimate was, tell us what you have today and what you think it looks like tomorrow, which was the wrong thing to do, especially when you have auto scaling, auto sizing, in the cloud. But as we took those on-prem security technologies and tried to map those into the cloud as well, the cost just became exorbitant and was significantly more than what our CFO was comfortable with. When we went back and we started looking at leveraging cloud native capabilities that metaphorically gave us the same sort of insight and protection, our costs were able to get down. Certainly the cloud is, well, from what I've seen, is not going to be cheaper than on-prem. But when you're trying to do a like-for-like model in the cloud, one, I just want to reiterate it. I don't think it makes sense and it sticks. And then two, it adds huge amounts of complexity, to your respective, environment, as well as now you start getting operational challenges because you have this dashboard and all these alerts coming in. So short answer, go back, leverage what you can natively in the cloud. It'll reduce your cost, make life a whole lot easier.
What about Xavier, do you want to kind of chime in on that?
Sure. Yeah, I can't echo more. the idea of a cloud first model where everybody was just like, I'm going to do everything in the cloud, ends up being, I'm just going to move my servers from one data center to another, and this data center actually ends up being a lot more expensive than my old data center. So you can't do that anymore. That was that.
Great.
If you're still there, stop right now and reevaluate. And so, Truist is a cloud where it makes sense company. We're not, we don't come out and say, hey, we're cloud first. We are, where we need to do cloud auto scaling, those type of workloads. We have built those applications, like I said, purely serverless, completely cloud native. Occasionally when we need an EC2 image or something, you'll see a couple servers in there, but the vast majority of our cloud applications are cloud native. And with that is the availability to scale and to understand what those are. We only when we sit there and look back and say, hey, remember what this, for example, our authentication layer is one of our recently, newly built applications, completely cloud native. We talk about what this thing looked like, back when it was on-prem, and the number of servers, the number of storage, and the database sizes, things like that. And only when we can sit there and pull up, here's this application that we completely rewrote and is completely cloud native. Now we can show real cloud ROI, because it is so hard when you talk about buying hardware, the cost of ownership versus the way that the economic model helps in the cloud. It's often very hard to really show apples to apples, but when you can, it is amazing. And so yeah, there is a way to build cloud ROI, but it's got to be in using cloud native technologies.
Agreed.
Well, a good deal.
Yep.
So, you want to add something, John, or shall we jump into?
I think I'm only going to add really quick that the cloud has its inherited advantages. So securing the cloud follows those cloud inherited advantages. So Xavier's exactly right. Cloud isn't for every possible solution, but there are inherent security advantages when you want to leverage the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. I mean, I don't see a way of not going there, with everything that's out there in terms of the resources and the ability to scale, as well as the computing power that's just really behind it, and the expectation on the, your end user side of having everything available 24/7 and not having a disruption. And there's a thunderstorm on the horizon, so my video feed is being a little challenging right now.
Don't send it my way.
It's the cloud coming for you.
It's the angry cloud's coming for me. Well, we have a question from our audience today, Eric Colossus, and I think it's actually a good one. It's probably really geared towards John, but does Orca have a FedRAMP NIST 800-171 approved offering, and are they seeking a CMMC certification to work with the DoD and defense contractors? And I think that is a great question.
Yeah. I can give the short answer. The answer is yes, we are pursuing FedRAMP. It is on, these roadmaps are always nebulous, but it's on for Q2. So that's when we plan to have FedRAMP. The other answer, and we support little things like we have a NIST 800-53 compliance framework that we have, but the long answer to that question is we're partnered with SAIC, a great partner of ours, and they're kind of helping us as in hand move forward into the federal. So we're working with them. You have things like authority to operate. They're helping us navigate that thing, and that's how we're moving forward with SAIC.
Perfect. Well, Jennifer, do you have any final thoughts about our conversation today? I thought it was fascinating and absolutely interesting. So any final thoughts? All right, well, let's jump into our announcements. And to our audience today, please let us know what you thought about our program. We absolutely would love your feedback. And also, if you are needing the CPE certification and proof of participation, let us know in your survey, and we will be very happy to send you that email tomorrow morning so that you can keep up with your continuing education. We've got a lot of events going on, so please check out our upcoming schedule page. We are doing ISE Fireside webinars, 10 Tech Talks, ISE Cocktails and Conversations, ISE private dinners in a select number of cities. In addition, we will be bringing back the ISE programs in 2022. So ISE East will be hosted in Atlanta on May 12th. So stay tuned. We've got lots of news coming on that, and we'll hope that you'll mark your calendars for May 12th. And if you'd like to learn more about Orca Security, certainly visit them at orca.security. Sarah Grant is the Senior Manager for Demand Generation, an absolute pleasure to work with. So you could reach out to Orca via Sarah, I should say. And so thank you very much. And I hope that you all enjoyed our conversations today and look forward to seeing you next time. So do check our calendar, answer our emails, and we'll see you either online or in person very, very soon. John, Xavier, and Andre, I want to thank each and every one of you for being with us today and sharing your knowledge, and many thanks to Orca Security for your sponsorship. We really appreciate our partnership with you. And to everybody, stay healthy and safe. And if you are in the path of some of these storms that are coming in, stay covered and stay safe from the angry clouds out there. So have a great afternoon and see you all soon.
Thank you all as
Thank
well.
you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
See ya.